I never imagined that moving to Pinecrest Ridge, a quiet subdivision in Boulder, Colorado, would turn my life into a legal nightmare involving an entitled HOA board member, destroyed property, and eventually handcuffs. But that's exactly what happened on a frigid January morning when Veronica Hastings slid her Mercedes SUV directly into my mailbox and then had the audacity to call the police on me. The whole mess started on a Tuesday morning. I woke up at 6:30 to the sound of scraping metal and shattering wood. I threw on a pair of jeans and a hoodie, rushing outside in my slippers to see what had happened. The sight that greeted me made my blood boil instantly. My mailbox, the one I had just replaced 3 months ago after the last incident with a snowplow, was completely demolished. Wooden splinters and twisted metal were scattered across my front lawn, and tire tracks carved deep grooves through the snow leading directly from the street to the wreckage. But the real kicker was seeing Veronica Hastings standing next to her pristine white Mercedes SUV, which had a small dent in the front bumper, talking rapidly on her phone. When she saw me, her expression didn't show an ounce of remorse or embarrassment. Instead, she looked angry, like I had somehow wronged her. "Are you serious right now?" I called out, walking toward her through the ankle-deep snow. "You just destroyed my mailbox." Veronica held up one perfectly manicured finger, signaling me to wait while she continued her phone conversation. I stood there in the freezing cold, my slippers already soaked through, listening to her complain to whoever was on the other end of the line. "Yes, officer, I need someone to come to Pinecrest Ridge subdivision immediately. There's a resident here who has created a dangerous situation that caused me to have an accident." She paused, listening. "The address is 4782 Mountain View Drive. Please hurry." My jaw dropped. "You're calling the cops on me. You're the one who crashed into my property." She held up that finger again, and I felt my hands clench into fists. I had dealt with Veronica before. She was the vice president of the Pinecrest Ridge HOA and had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable ever since I moved in 18 months ago. It started with warnings about my trash cans being visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup. Then came the citations for my lawn being a quarter-inch too long, according to their absurd standards. Last month, she had fined me $200 because my holiday lights were the wrong shade of white. "Thank you, officer. I'll be waiting." She ended the call and finally turned her full attention to me. "Marcus, this is completely unacceptable." "What's unacceptable is you destroying my mailbox, Veronica." "Your negligence destroyed your own mailbox," she shot back, her voice sharp and condescending. "You failed to shovel the street in front of your property, which created an icy hazard. I slid because of your failure to maintain your assigned route." I stared at her, genuinely confused. "My assigned route? What are you talking about? The city is responsible for the streets." Veronica pulled out her phone, tapping away with quick, precise movements. Section 12. Subsection 4 of the HOA bylaws, which were updated at the December meeting you apparently didn't bother to attend. All residents are now responsible for shoveling a 50-foot section of the street directly in front of their property within 4 hours of snowfall cessation. "You're in violation." "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," I said. "The city has snowplows for the streets. We're supposed to keep our driveways and sidewalks clear, not the actual roads." "The bylaw clearly states." "I don't care what the bylaw states," I interrupted. "You can't just make up rules that contradict city ordinances. And even if that was somehow legitimate, which it's not, you still crashed into my mailbox. You're responsible for the damage." Veronica's face flushed red, a stark contrast against the white snow surrounding us. "I most certainly am not. This accident was caused by your negligence. In fact, you should be paying for the damage to my vehicle." I actually laughed at that, a harsh bark of disbelief. "You're out of your mind. We'll see what the police have to say about that." I was about to respond when I noticed my neighbor, Tom Henderson, standing on his porch watching the whole scene unfold. He gave me a sympathetic look and a small wave. Tom had warned me about Veronica when I first moved in. He'd been fighting with the HOA for 5 years over various petty disputes and had the legal bills to prove it. Within 10 minutes, a Boulder Police Department cruiser pulled up to the curb. A young officer stepped out, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on this cold morning. His name tag read Officer J. Martinez. "Morning, folks. I got a call about an accident." He pulled out a small notebook, his breath visible in the frigid air. Veronica immediately launched into her story, speaking rapidly and gesturing dramatically at my mailbox wreckage, the icy street, and me. She painted a picture of gross negligence on my part, a dangerous situation I had created, and her narrow escape from what could have been a serious injury. Officer Martinez listened patiently, occasionally jotting down notes. When she finally finished, he turned to me. "Sir, what's your version of events?" I kept my voice calm and factual. "I woke up to the sound of the crash, came outside to find my mailbox destroyed and Miss Hastings next to her vehicle. The tire tracks clearly show she left the road and hit my property. As for this claim about shoveling the street, that's not a city requirement, and I question whether the HOA even has the authority to make such a rule." Officer Martinez walked over to examine the mailbox remains and the tire tracks. He took several photos with his phone, then walked along the street, examining the road conditions. The street was icy, but not unusually so for a Colorado winter morning. The city snowplows had come through during the night, and there was a light coating of snow and ice that typically formed in these temperatures. He came back to where we were standing. "Miss Hastings, did you hit any ice or black ice before the accident?" "Yes, right there." She pointed to a spot on the street about 15 feet from my mailbox. "That section should have been cleared." "And you were driving how fast?" Veronica hesitated. "The speed limit, 25 miles per hour. Officer Martinez made another note. "The thing is, madam, residential street maintenance is the responsibility of the city, not individual homeowners. Even if your HOA passed some kind of rule about residents shoveling the streets, it doesn't supersede city ordinances or create liability." "But the bylaw clearly states, HOA bylaws can't contradict city or state law," Officer Martinez said firmly but politely. "As for the accident itself, you left the roadway and struck this gentleman's property. That makes you at fault for the damage." Veronica's face went from red to purple. "This is absurd. I want to speak to your supervisor." "You're welcome to file a complaint, madam, but that won't change the facts of the situation." He turned to me. "Sir, you'll want to document all this damage with photos and get an estimate for repairs. You can file a claim with her insurance company." "I most certainly will not be filing any insurance claim for this," Veronica snapped. "This is his fault." Officer Martinez sighed. "Madam, you can handle this through insurance or he can take you to small claims court. Either way, you're responsible for the damage you caused to his property. Now, I'm not going to cite anyone this morning, but I suggest you both exchange insurance information and handle this properly." Veronica looked like she wanted to argue more, but even she could see this wasn't going her way. She pulled out her phone again. "I'm calling Gregory right now. We'll see about this." Gregory Pemberton was the HOA president, a retired real estate attorney who was somehow even more insufferable than Veronica. I wasn't looking forward to dealing with him, but at least the police officer had confirmed what I already knew. Veronica was completely in the wrong. After Officer Martinez left, having given us both a case number for the incident, Veronica got into her Mercedes and drove off without another word to me. I stood in my yard, looking at the destroyed mailbox and already dreading the fight I knew was coming. Tom walked over from his house, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "Man, that woman is something else. Tell me about it," I said, kicking at a piece of the broken mailbox post. "Now I've got to replace this thing again. Did she really try to blame you for driving into your own property? Apparently there's some new bylaw about shoveling the street in front of your house." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "The street? That's insane. They can't enforce that." "That's what the cop said, but you know Veronica and Gregory, they'll find some way to make my life hell over this." Tom nodded grimly. "Document everything, Marcus. Photos, videos, get that police report, save all your communications. Trust me, you're going to need it all." He was right, and I spent the next hour taking detailed photos and videos of everything. The mailbox wreckage, the tire tracks, the street conditions, even the small dent in Veronica's bumper that I could see in some of the earlier photos I'd taken. I sent all of it to my email and backed it up in 3 different places. By noon, I had received a certified letter delivered by hand from Gregory Pemberton himself. He showed up at my door in a 3-piece suit despite the casual Tuesday, looking every bit the pompous attorney he was. "Marcus Yates," he said formally, extending an envelope. "Consider yourself officially notified of an emergency HOA hearing regarding multiple violations and your responsibility for today's incident." I took the envelope but didn't open it yet. "Gregory, you and I both know Veronica was at fault." The police confirmed it. "The police don't determine HOA policy violations," he said smoothly. "You failed to maintain your assigned snow removal section, which is a clear violation of our updated bylaws. Additionally, your mailbox was not in compliance with our design standards, which contributed to the severity of the damage. My mailbox was fine until Veronica drove into it. We'll be discussing all of this at the hearing. Thursday evening, 7 p.m. at the community center. Attendance is mandatory." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Marcus, I'd suggest bringing legal representation. This could result in fines of up to $5,000 plus suspension of certain property privileges." I watched him walk back to his black Cadillac, feeling a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. This was escalating fast. I had a decent job as a software engineer at a startup in downtown Boulder, and I could afford a lawyer if necessary, but the principle of the whole thing infuriated me. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I was being threatened with thousands of dollars in fines. I opened the envelope and read through the formal notice. It was full of legal jargon and cited sections of the HOA bylaws I'd never even heard of. There were claims about my mailbox being 3 inches too tall, according to community standards established in 2019. Accusations that I regularly violated parking rules by occasionally parking my car in my driveway overnight instead of in my garage. A list of supposed lawn care violations going back 6 months. And of course, the snow removal violation that had supposedly caused Veronica's accident. This was clearly a coordinated attack, probably something Veronica and Gregory had been planning for a while, and were now using today's incident as an excuse to execute. I immediately called Tom, who recommended a lawyer he'd used before named Patricia Chen. She specialized in HOA disputes and apparently had a reputation for not taking any nonsense from power-hungry board members. Patricia was able to meet with me that same afternoon at her office in Boulder. She was in her late 40s, sharply dressed, and had the kind of direct manner I appreciated. "Let me see everything you've got," she said after I'd explained the situation. I showed her all the photos and videos, the police report number, the certified notice from Gregory, and pulled up the HOA bylaws on my phone to show her the section about snow removal. Patricia read through everything carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. After about 20 minutes, she looked up at me with a slight smile. "This is good. Really good, actually. For you, I mean." "How so?" "First, this snow removal bylaw they're citing was passed at a December meeting, correct?" "According to Veronica, yes." "Did you receive notice of this meeting at least 15 days in advance as required by Colorado state law?" I thought back. "I got something in the mail, but it was maybe a week before the meeting. I remember because I was going to be out of town that week for work anyway." Patricia made a note. "That's a violation right there. HOA meetings that involve bylaw changes require 15-day notice to all residents. If they didn't provide proper notice, the bylaw change is invalid. So I wasn't actually required to shovel the street." "You were never required to shovel the street. That's city property and city responsibility. But even their attempt to make you responsible was done improperly, which strengthens your case. Second, these other violations they're citing: your mailbox height, parking your car in your driveway, these are selective enforcement issues. Have they cited every resident whose mailbox might be slightly off the specified height? Do they fine everyone who parks in their driveway overnight? No way. Half the neighborhood parks in their driveways. Selective enforcement is a big problem for HOAs legally. They can't arbitrarily decide to enforce rules against some residents while ignoring the same violations by others. That's discriminatory and legally actionable." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "So, what do we do?" "We go to this hearing on Thursday, and we make it very clear that you will not be paying any fines. You will not be accepting any blame for Miss Hastings destroying your property. And if they continue this harassment, you'll be filing a lawsuit against both the HOA and Miss Hastings personally for damages, legal fees, and distress." "Will that actually work?" Patricia leaned back in her chair. "In my experience, most HOA board members are bullies who fold the moment someone stands up to them with actual legal knowledge. They rely on residents being too intimidated or too busy to fight back. But sometimes you get board members who are so convinced of their own authority that they dig in deeper. If that happens, we'll take them to court and we'll win." I hired Patricia on the spot, feeling better than I had all day. We spent another hour going over strategy for the Thursday hearing, and she gave me homework. Collect evidence of selective enforcement by photographing other residents' mailboxes, documenting cars parked in driveways throughout the neighborhood, and getting written statements from neighbors about their experiences with the HOA. That evening, I walked around Pinecrest Ridge with my phone, documenting everything Patricia had suggested. It didn't take long to find clear evidence that I was being singled out. There were mailboxes of all different heights and styles throughout the neighborhood. Cars parked in at least a dozen driveways. I even found 3 other houses with lawns that were objectively longer than mine had ever been. I knocked on doors and talked to neighbors. Most were sympathetic, and several were willing to provide written statements about their own issues with the HOA. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd had problems with Veronica and Gregory. There was a woman named Sandra Morrison who'd been fined repeatedly for having flower pots on her front porch that were supposedly the wrong color. A retired couple, the Hendersons, who'd been cited for their Christmas decorations being up 2 days past the January 1st deadline, despite a snowstorm making it dangerous to climb on their roof. A single dad named Chris Johnson, who'd gotten a violation notice because his kid's basketball hoop was visible from the street. The pattern was clear. Veronica and Gregory were using the HOA as their personal fiefdom, making up or selectively enforcing rules to harass residents they didn't like or who didn't show them sufficient deference. Wednesday morning, I filed an insurance claim for my destroyed mailbox. The estimate came to $800 for a replacement mailbox that met Postal Service requirements. I also sent a formal demand letter to Veronica's insurance company, copying Gregory and the HOA board. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Veronica's shrill voice. "How dare you file an insurance claim against me? Do you have any idea what this could do to my premiums?" "Maybe you should have thought of that before you drove into my mailbox," I said calmly. "This is harassment, Marcus, pure harassment. I'm the victim here, and you're trying to extort money from me." "Extort? I'm asking you to pay for property damage you caused. That's not extortion, that's basic responsibility. We'll see what the board has to say about this tomorrow night. Gregory is prepared to pursue maximum penalties against you." "Looking forward to it," I said, and hung up. Tom called me a few minutes later, laughing. "Dude, the HOA Facebook group is going crazy. Did you see what Veronica posted?" I didn't even know there was an HOA Facebook group. Tom sent me the link and I requested to join. While waiting for approval, Tom sent me screenshots of Veronica's post. It was a long, rambling screed about how I was a dangerous resident who refused to follow community rules, created hazardous conditions that caused her to have an accident, and was now attempting to defraud her insurance company. She called me entitled, reckless, and a threat to property values. She even suggested that I might be doing all of this deliberately to cause problems for the HOA because I resented their reasonable oversight. The comments were mixed. Some people, clearly friends of Veronica's, were making supportive comments about how she was doing such a great job protecting the community. But there were plenty of other residents pushing back, pointing out that the city was responsible for street maintenance, asking why they'd never heard about this snow removal bylaw, and questioning why Veronica wasn't taking responsibility for the accident. One comment from a user named Beth Rodriguez particularly caught my eye. "This is exactly the kind of overreach I warned everyone about when Gregory proposed expanding the board's powers last year. They're using the HOA to bully people they don't like instead of actually maintaining the community." I was finally approved to join the group and spent an hour reading through old posts. It was eye-opening. There were dozens of complaints about Veronica and Gregory dating back years. Residents describing arbitrary fines, selective enforcement, and board members showing up unannounced to inspect properties. There were also several posts about the December meeting where the snow removal bylaw had been passed, with multiple residents complaining that they'd received inadequate notice, and that only 12 people had been present to vote on major bylaw changes in a neighborhood of over 200 homes. Thursday morning, I woke up to find my mailbox area had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "scofflaw" in large red letters across my garage door and scattered trash across my front lawn. I immediately called the police and documented everything with photos and video before cleaning it up. Officer Martinez came out again, this time with a partner, Officer K. Williams. They took a report and examined the spray paint. "Any idea who might have done this?" Officer Williams asked. "I've been having issues with the HOA," I explained, filling them in on the ongoing dispute. "That lady who hit your mailbox?" Officer Martinez asked. "Her and the HOA president. There's a hearing tonight about the whole situation." The officers exchanged glances. Officer Williams shook her head slightly. "We can't prove who did this without evidence like security camera footage." "Do you have any cameras?"